Sixth grade, I knew I wanted to be a host at ESPN. And then 20 years later, I'm hosting my first SportsCenter.
When did real estate pop into your head as like, you're so busy, you're doing all this stuff. How did you even feel like you had time, and like, what was the why behind it?
It's hard to get to ESPN. It's even harder, more difficult to stay at ESPN and to get your second and your third contract. Let me find a condo to put $20,000 down on and get a renter in there, and let me just see how I like it. So I did. It was Hartford. This was pre-boom. There were definitely some guidelines and some guardrails that protected me sort of as an investor. And I bought my next condo in Bristol for $62,000, and I put that money down to purchase that condo.
No matter what your profession is, like on the outside, people either look like they have $1 million or sometimes they don't, and you'd be surprised who has what, but it's what you do with what you have.
I have friends who their first deal was out of state, and not just the next state over.
Like, we go through rigorous workouts every day, and like, I have dogs next to me in the locker room, and like, we are just attacking life. And he's like, dude, I get thrown into the real world. Gary, officially welcome to the Wealth Juice podcast. Corey and I are stoked to have you on the show, man. We just talked pre-recording for about 15 minutes and realized we are kind of cut from the same cloth, have a lot of similarities in our background, and area in New England we'll talk about, but we are just blessed to have you on the show today, man. And I can't wait to share your story with our listeners.
Appreciate you guys reaching out to me a couple of weeks ago. I'm glad that we got connected. I'm sorry that I'm already eating up like a chunk of our airtime by chewing the fat for 15 minutes before we even got rolling officially. But it's cool to hop on with a couple other millennials who accidentally found themselves in like important positions and had to think of ways to now like be adults.
What did we say? It's fun. You feel like you're still 15, 16, but for some reason your back hurts every time you wake up.
Yeah, exactly. Now you got gray hair and you're like, wait a minute, what?
Yeah, man, time is flying and more responsibilities. I have kids popping out. Like, it's just, we're at the next stage of our lives. And it's so funny, man. Like, we talked pre-recording about, like, we watched you growing up on ESPN, on Nesson. I told you I grew up in New England. So your coverage with the Red Sox, all that stuff. Now you're an ESPN host. So I think today what we want to do is unpack your story on just the inception of how you got to where you got professionally, and then how real estate plays into your financial picture and kind of that second life that you're leading, maybe behind closed doors, and just kind of wrap it all into one pretty box here.
Yeah, definitely. So I've been at ESPN since 2018. Actually, like right around the time of us recording is like my official 7-year anniversary at the Four Letters, which is crazy because when I was in middle school, I grew up in Colorado. Sixth grade, I knew I wanted to be a host at ESPN. And then 20 years later, I'm hosting my first SportsCenter the week of Thanksgiving in 2018 with Jay Harris. And I remember that day, and people are like, man, you probably thought of it so fondly. Dude, it was like one of the worst days of my life because I couldn't sleep the night before. I couldn't eat the night before. I was so freaking nervous to host my very first SportsCenter because, like you guys mentioned, I grew up, my entire childhood was turning on ESPN and watching it for 8 hours a day. And then all of a sudden I find myself 20 years later on the same desk in the same seat, sharing the same studio as like the legends who have come before. And I'm like, holy smokes. So I remember the night before my first SportsCenter, I couldn't think, I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. So I was so relieved to be done with my first show. It wasn't a feeling that I anticipated having, actually. I thought it was going to be like full of jubilation, like, oh, I made it. But I was like, oh my God, thank God it's done. Unfortunately, 7 years later, I've become more comfortable, but every day I go to work is still definitely one of those like pinch me moments. Like, holy smokes, I'm here.
Man. So candidly, every morning, I mean, you and Randy Scott are like, what a duo you two are. It's
my guy, dude.
Yeah, it's so fun to watch.
My guy.
I'm curious about, so most of the time what happens to people is like, for me, I got into coaching basketball because I was a player, and then I was like looking in the mirror at 5'9", like, well, this isn't going to go too far. So I got into the coaching, but you wanted to be an anchor.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. But you wanted to be an anchor, like or anchor host, whatever you like to call it. You'd wanted to do that from such a young age. I'm curious, like, what was it about that job, or like, how did you know? And then we'll parlay it into the real estate stuff. But how did you know this is what you wanted to do?
So in sixth grade, it kind of happened, by chance. I was one of those dudes in middle school and high school who, always hit the word count, who was always getting in trouble by the teachers. Hey, you're talking too much, quiet down. And I was actually again, talking too much one day in the library, and actually the librarian said, "Hey, if you like talking so much, come do the morning announcements." This was in sixth grade in my middle school. And I was like, that sounds freaking awesome. So that's legit how it started. I was doing the morning announcements. It was called Cougar News at Thornton Middle School. And I remember there was a TV. I'm 38. So there was a TV in every classroom. And this was forward technology. We were broadcasting the lunch menu, student announcements, bus schedule every single day. And I remember being a sixth grader walking around the halls and like seventh graders and eighth graders who might as well have been like our parents in terms of like the height and growth and, puberty disparity, were like recognizing me in the hallways. Like, dude, you're the kid from Cougar News. These were eighth graders with mustaches. And I was like, holy smokes, I think I'm famous. So I think that's sort of where I caught the bug, right? Like, man, I could sort of entertain in a way. Obviously I didn't know how far you could take it, but being in sports, then being part of like the student run broadcast, legit was the springboard for me to say, all right, well, there's a profession here. So I always knew it was going to be that sort of angle into sports and not like the playing professionally. I knew that ship sailed quickly. I definitely knew it sailed when I was in high school. I was a wide receiver, but I was running like a 5'1" 40.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, this ain't going to cut it at the next level.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
that's funny, man. So I appreciate you sharing that, and then also going all in on something too. And that's stuff we like to talk about here. But what happens to a lot of, we said millennials, like 30 to 40-year-olds, is that regardless if you love your job or not, which it sounds like, of course you do. And like you've made it to this level where like people recognize your face, they see you around. Like I'm sure there's like a level of fame that comes with it. But I'm curious about the back end. It's like, regardless if you love your job, and Ryan and I liked our jobs before we got into real estate. I got into real estate full time, and I was thinking, you still have this thing that's like, well, I'm going to work every day and I have to punch a clock and I have to trade time for money. So it like, you realize as you go through the phase of life, things start to change. When did real estate pop into your head as like, you're so busy, you're doing all this stuff? How did you even feel like you had time? And like, what was the why behind it, really?
Complete accident. It really was. So in my 20s, I was just running a sprint. Let's get to as much money or as much of a presence or prominence or prosperity as you could possibly get to in the shortest amount of time. And just for every viewer or listener, nothing's overnight. I took basically from sixth grade till I was about 30. It was moving every year and a half, especially post-graduation. It was a sprint. I was always a rent, don't buy, because I was a nomad. I went from Colorado to Wyoming, from Wyoming to Houston, from Houston to Boston, Boston to Dallas, Dallas to finally ESPN when I was 30 in 2018. And I thought I was good to go. Hey, I'm at ESPN. It's hard to get to ESPN. It's even harder, more difficult to stay at ESPN and to get your second and your third contract, to which fortunately, I've been fortunate enough. Now I'm in my third contract at ESPN, but I never even thought about the real estate thing, legitimately. Never thought of it as like something I wanted to do or that I needed to do until COVID, right? COVID sort of changed everything. And I was fortunate to back then be still hosting SportsCenter Snapchat. So I was still going into the office every day because we were an internet show. It was 8 minutes. We always had something to edit because it wasn't a full-blown hour-long SportsCenter. So I was going into the office every day, but it was just, I never saw anybody. It was me and the producer, and that's it. So it got the wheels spinning in my head like, all right, just in case I need some sort of, whether it was a hobby or a side hustle, I didn't know at the time, but I needed something to take my mind off of what the hell is going on. Real estate was the thing. I think when you turn 30, something sort of just changes in your mind, like a switch flips, and you're like, real estate. Yeah, that sounds about right. And I fell into it on accident.
Well, I want to get into your story of falling into it, Gary, but this is like, it's fascinating what you just said because it confirms something for me. I'm 33, Rise 34. So in COVID, I was 29, 29, 30, 28, 29, whatever you want to say. So it's that same exact thing. So it was not only turning 30, but COVID happening. And we started our podcast, our social media platform, and our real estate journey. I had a couple units, but we really started it then. So there's so many things you look back on with COVID and being like, people had this resetting of the mind. Like, I have to do something different, and you actually had time to sit and think of like, what do I actually want to do? So I find it's really weird how it aligned with us all being like, late 20s, early 30s, that the timing was right. I'm curious about your first couple moves. Like, what did you do to start, and how did you even know where to like really tap in?
I had $20,000 saved, and what I guess 5 years ago. So I was 32, 33. So that could be not enough in some people's eyes at 32, 33, a lot in some people's eyes at 32, 33. But I remember I had $20,000 saved, and I was like, I have to do something with this money, because the 14 cents a month I'm making on interest, it ain't going to cut it. So listen, no kids, no wife. If I'm going to lose $20,000, now's the time to lose it. So I did, and I was a big fan of a lot of the real estate content that was coming out. I was a subscriber, of Bigger Pockets, I should say, at the time. And, it was sort of like Brandon had this buy box chart that kind of just took off. And I think a lot of people actually started real estate because of that YouTube video. And I was like, let me find a condo to put $20,000 down on and get a renter in there, and let me just see how I like it. So I did. It was Hartford. This was pre-boom. So I got the condo for like 70 grand. It was turnkey. I got a tenant in there right away off of one of the programs here that helps, I guess, sort of underserved. It wasn't Section 8. It's sort of like an underserved community program. So there were definitely some guidelines and some guardrails that protected me sort of as an investor. And I'll never forget, my real estate agent was like, this is the easiest real estate you're ever going to do. And I was like, what are you talking about? This was super easy. What could possibly go wrong? And then it was literally my very next property when I caught the bug. So I bought this in June of 2020. I sold my Jeep because I needed more capital, because I just got done I just put 20 grand down. So I sold my 2012 Jeep Wrangler. I needed more capital. I sold it for 19 grand, I remember. And I bought my next condo in Bristol for 62,000, and I put that money down to purchase that condo. Got a tenant in there. This was October, so 4 months later, got a tenant in there, and this was like sometimes you learn a lot more from stuff that happens than you can ever read in a book or listen on a podcast. This was a guy, he was like, I'm trying to relocate my family. My girlfriend's pregnant. I got a son. I'm trying to take him out of the Bronx. Fresh start. I don't have a job, but I'll give you 10 months prepaid. I'm like, I'll take.
That's like every red flag of what you're not
exactly
supposed to do.
Exactly. But I'm like, certainly this dude's got like 2 kids, and the story seemed legit on the surface. So he gave me like 12 grand, 11 grand cash. He moved in, and I'm like, certainly this dude's going to find a job in the next 10 months. Guys, do I have a shocker for you? Guess who didn't find a job over the course of the next 10, 12 months? And then, again, it was a $1,500 cost to me to get him evicted, but everything else that I learned, you can't really put a price tag on. You know what I mean? How to vet tenants, the right questions to ask, and just how to safeguard yourself. So I scaled up quickly in about a year and a half to 9 total doors, and now I'm sitting at 6, about 5 years later.
Awesome, man. So I want people to like kind of highlight, or I want to highlight something that you said. The not having the fear of like diving in and making these mistakes, when I had this conversation with you sitting down, I'm thinking like, well, I know that you're big time, quote unquote, big time. Now you have a couple contracts with ESPN, but like starting out with $20,000, like people are probably going to be listening like, oh, well, Gary had all this money to start, and you're telling that that's not the case, right? Like that's not how this works. So to be able to put down 19 and not be afraid and bet on yourself and just know this is going to work and make all the mistakes and then still come out on the other side and have 9 doors scaled back to 6. I think it's a testament to anybody that's sitting there with their 20,000 or with their 40,000 or with their 50,000 that's earning whatever minimal interest. Like take the leap, learn, and it's okay to make the mistake because you can recover. And Gary did. So I think it's great, man. I appreciate you sharing that. Ryan, do you have you want to jump in here? I'm hogging it a little bit.
No, you're good, dude. You guys are riffing. You kind of took the words right out of my mouth. I thought about that 20K, and I think a lot of people they'll see your name in shining lights, dude. And you're keeping it real at 32, 33. 20K is a lot of money for some people, and then for others, they're like only 20K, right? And I want to highlight because your journey is so unique to you, and meaning like not just Gary. Ryan's journey is unique to Ryan. Corey's is unique to Corey. So to be able to share this and say, hey, no matter what your profession is, like on the outside, people either look like they have $1 million or sometimes they don't. And you'd be surprised who has what, but it's what you do with what you have. And I think
Definitely.
taking that leap of faith and saying, hey, dude, I'm just going to bet on myself. Too many people get afraid and they make excuses on every little thing. You could have
Correct.
quit right after that tenant didn't find the job, right? And you're like, nope,
Correct.
I see the benefits of real estate. I'm just going to put my foot to the gas. And it's what you did with every stage of your career. I think you were more prepped for real estate than you ever thought. I think back to, my career too, and things that I've done. And like, there's a lot of people that mine's maybe a little bit more stable, meaning like I haven't had to puddle jump a bunch, but for you moving every couple of years and like resetting, meeting new people and like transplanting yourself, there's an art to that, dude. And I think that's prepared you for everything moving forward. So I don't want to glaze over that. And I think it's a great story for people that want to get started. I guess my advice or question would be, right now, being where you're at in your career, you're on a contract basis, right? But you're buying properties. And so is the goal for you to stay put in one area and invest in one segment of the market? Are you thinking that you want to, kind of expand your horizons? I'm kind of looking forward for your like thoughts on where you're going to continue to invest in the future.
Yeah. I think it's safe to say for me, even though I'm a millennial, I'm sort of old fashioned in that I need to see it, touch it, feel it, be able to put my hands on the grass in terms of my real estate investing strategy. I want to go to it. I want to see it. I have friends who their first deal was out of state, and not just the next state over, but like a 3-hour plane ride. And I'm like, oof, I don't know if I could do that. So I was very, very centrally focused in places because I was self-managing, and now I have a property manager, my friend Adam. He's the man. And he's a, Central Connecticut guy. And one of these days we're going to get into a deal together, but I was very much, I want to be in control of everything. I want to be able to handle everything. So it wasn't up until December of 2023 when I bought my first out of state deal, which was New Hampshire. We were talking about it before we fired things up. So I'm in Connecticut, New Hampshire, 3 hours door to door from me. I bought in the Lakes region. So that right there was sort of me taking a step out of my comfort zone, saying I want to get into a place where I can't make it. You can make it in a day trip, but it's not right down the street. I have 3 properties that are within 1 mile of each other in West Hartford. So like that kind of gives you a peek of how I like to manage things. So I certainly wouldn't shut down anything else out of state, but I'm taking baby steps. Because again, I like seeing it. I like doing work myself. You guys probably, have the same honorary degrees from YouTube University that I have. So I feel like I am kind of handy. I like taking care of properties myself. So that's sort of my strategy right now. And I guess the buy box, the requirements for me right now, my girlfriend and I have been living together for 2 years. So obviously I'm taking, a lot of her factors into consideration too, because I was very much buy a house, lived in renovation. I don't care if it's got running water, electricity, whatever. I've lived in renovations before. You guys have heard the story. I was peeing in a bucket for 2 months in the duplex that I bought. I was cool with that. I probably can't do that right now, given my circumstances, but I am very much trying to purchase a property or two every calendar year. That's kind of what I'm looking at.
Yeah, I think that's a great move. And we tell people that are just starting out, that's the way to do it. We know, I know you were interviewed Bigger Pockets recently. Like Craig Kurlop is becoming a friend of ours. We interviewed him. I was on his show. He was on ours, and he slept behind a curtain for a couple of years and then he moved. Like it's kind of that delaying gratification thing that I think even in your 20s and 30s, like you're going to look back, Gary, when you're 48 and be like, I have all this equity built up. I'm so glad I took those moves. I'm curious about the biggest thing that I want to ask you is the balance. Like you have a very demanding W-2 job. I don't even know if it's W-2, but like you have a very demanding day job.
It is.
Right?
Yeah. It's W-2.
Yeah. Yeah. So like, what is it like for you to balance the growing there and trying to fulfill all your dreams at ESPN and whatever's next, and then also doing something on the side? Because a lot of people think I have a full-time job. I don't have any time. I can't do this. And it's just, the reality is just not true.
I never want to lose the fact of like, I mentioned to you guys, I had like $20,000 saved up at 32, 33. I mean, I grew up, my dad was in the Army. He retired from the Army and became a state trooper. So he's always been in government public service. And my mom, he met her when he was stationed in the Army in Korea. So she moved over here, gave up everything. So she never really had like a proper career here in America. She would, work with her friends at like restaurants because my mom was really the only one of her friends who spoke English. So she would be front of the house at these restaurants. So like people might pick up, a controller or a phone and see me now. And it's like, oh, Gary gets to go to these cool events or he's hosting SportsCenter and all this. But when I tell you that I came from the most, lower middle class upbringing and background, that you look that up in a dictionary and it's a picture of me and my family. So I never, ever want to lose sight of that, like the humble beginnings, so to speak. So part of me is like, man, I need to do something like with my hands. I want something that I can put my fingerprints on. Doing SportsCenter and working in sports media, it's very cool and you get to meet a lot of cool people and there's a lot of awesome opportunities. But I totally understand the privilege in working like that and working in that field, and that 99.9% of the population will never be able to experience something hands-on like that. But I know a big majority of that population understands like hard work and ethic. And I never ever want to have those two things separate from themselves. I don't want to lose sight, I guess, of what I'm trying to say is like my regular upbringing.
Who you are at your core, dude. And
yeah, exactly.
Dude, I wasn't sure when I was going to bring it up, but I wanted to highlight something just for people that are listening in the car. I want you to flip onto YouTube and watch this in real life, because you'll see Gary in his green hoodie, backwards hat, and he looks just like us. And I think
yeah, definitely. Once you guys got on the call, it's like, yes, all right, I'm safe.
Dude,
I was like, I'm safe, dude. I'm safe.
Mold. Like, what I will say is like, but when you see on TV, you got the hair done, you look prim and proper, right? And that's the avatar for ESPN. It's awesome, dude. I'm not taking anything away from it, but what I love is shows like this, we get to know the real person. And the ESPN, dude, however long you go and however many contracts you have this amazing career. But like, I love that you don't have to tie your identity to your career all the time, and remembering your humble beginnings and who you are. You're building a life outside of your W-2, if you will. And that's why we try to bring this up to people, is like, at some point, whether you're 80, 70, or it happens in your 40s, like at some point you'll break away from your career and it's going to be you again. Right. And you're like, well, what do I like? What am I good at? It's a strange thing. And so I just like separating the identities now and in these conversations, because sometimes it takes people a long time to figure out who they are. And I look at your Instagram, the Kimchi Poppy, dude, and you're talking a lot about real estate and like tying things to real life things that are going on versus just your W-2 all the time. And it humanizes you. And so I just wanted to take a note or time to highlight that, but I also wanted to talk to you about personal branding, because Corey and I we're very big on, hey, listen, like, it's one thing to want to do something, but to become really good at something, you need to surround yourself with people that are doing it at a high level. And how can you provide value to them? How do they know who you are, what you've done? And we have transitioned to social media to build our personal brand and digital resume. So maybe you can talk about this from the lens of what you've done at ESPN, but also maybe just personal branding 101 and why you started the Instagram, and how you think this plays into the future of people and success and the world as it moves forward.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, Ryan. That was a really good observation, because that's actually something and cues I've taken from like athletes who retire and then they find themselves in the ESPN pipeline. And now they're talking about the sport that they just got done playing. And one of the biggest things, when you catch them in an honest moment, was once I knew my playing career was over, you lose a part of yourself, right? These guys, their entire life, these men and women, their entire lives have been the best at what they've done at every single level that they've played it at, from little league to middle school, high school, college, and then you get to the professional level, whether you have a cup of coffee in whatever pro sports league, or you're Rudy Gay, who actually just made his SportsCenter debut on our show a couple of weeks ago. And that's why the name is fresh in my mind, because his very first SportsCenter show, or very first show at ESPN, was on our SportsCenter. And I'm like, damn, this dude's 36. He just spent 18 years in the NBA. 18 years in the NBA. And now he's like making his ESPN debut. So that was kind of crazy. It makes you feel old. It's like, damn, I remember when like you were playing at UConn, you know what I'm saying? And now he's transitioning into, a whole new area. Fortunately, he gets to stay close to the game. And he's not one of the athletes who said this specifically to me, but so many of them have said, I didn't know what to do. all I ever knew was being like the man in my sport. So I guess to go back to your question is I love that people can associate me with ESPN and hey, I watch you on SportsCenter. I grew up watching you on SportsCenter Snapchat. I still get a ton of people who are like, man, I grew up watching you on Nesson. But I don't want that to be the only thing people remember me for. I don't want that to be I like to what I like having is people come up to me and being like, hey, you're Gary Striewski. And I don't know what they're going to say next. I saw you on House Hunters. I listened to you on Wealth Juice. I listened to you, on Bigger Pockets, or I watched your Talking Watches, right? So I like the X factor of people coming up to me and I don't know where they're going to say they know me from. So just sort of diversifying your identity in an organic way. I'm not putting anything out there that feels foreign to me or feels fake. And I think at the end of the day, that's like the most important thing is people on social media, they'll be able to sniff out your BS.
Without a doubt, man. They definitely will. And it's funny because it's kind of hard to know like who's going to be, good at the transition. And like, just as I can kind of see it now. Anytime the NBA guys start a podcast, I'm like, oh man, they must think that they need to set up the next thing. Cause I watch
Correct.
Paul George, for example, I'm like, he knows he's coming to the end of his career. Like he knows it and he's good at podcasting. I'm just throwing that out there, but I think I just think it's interesting how the transition and to keep like, for example, Tom Brady literally left the NFL and now did he not just do the Super Bowl? Like wasn't Tom like announcing this? So obviously he's the GOAT. So it's like he had a fast track up there, but like guys like Tony Romo, he's excellent. Mm-hmm. So the transition and the changing of the identity to me is it must be a really, really hard thing. And I watch guys that are, like you said, Gary, at the top of their game and put all their time, energy, and effort into it, and then have to have this moment of pivot. And what you've done is you've allowed yourself to say, regardless of how good you are at what you do, there's a runway, right? Like there's definitely a runway. And like, I hope you're at ESPN for the next 20 years, if that's where you want to be, but you don't make the decisions at the end of the day. Like someone else, you're part of the decision. How good you are factors in, but then they have whatever, something happens, they want to hire somebody else. So setting up your future and the next version of Gary, I think is probably just an ideal thing to set in. And Ryan, go ahead, man. I know you had something that you wanted to chime in there with.
Yeah, I just don't want to forget to say this because it's so timely and it's so interesting, man. Like I'm putting you on the same pedestal as these professional athletes because you're lumped in with that company, but you're a professional. You reached a very pinnacle of your game here, dude. You've traveled around the country. You've had to take job after job, and then you made it. You got your 3 big contracts. Like not many people do that, right? And so we've had conversations with guys like Brett Hundley. He used to play for the Packers. Devin Kennard for the Cardinals. And Marcus Colston, who used to play for the Saints. And dude,
Saints,
all these guys said the same thing. We talked about the exact, like the identity shift. Like a lot of it was conversations about money. How did you manage this during your career? And then when you left, a lot of these guys, as they approached their last contract, they started investing in real estate. And it's just funny how they have had to disassociate themselves with the league because they don't want to be built into this box for the rest of their life. And Marcus Colston was one of those guys. He's like, dude, like, truthfully, like sometimes I feel like we're treated like mascots. Like they don't know anything beyond us in the helmet and running down the field. Whereas I'm a very intellectual person. I'm an introvert. I'm very into finance and like just different things like that. So he's had to separate his brand. He runs a successful venture capital firm. And then Devin Kennard, we had a mastermind out in Arizona and we got to really chat with him. And he's like, dude, it's so funny. This is a little bit of a pivot, but we kind of asked like mentality. And he's like, dude, it's so funny. Like we go through rigorous workouts every day. And like, I have dogs next to me in the locker room and like, we are just attacking life. And he's like, dude, I get thrown into the real world. And there's so many, for lack of better words, like mouth breathers. He didn't say that, but he's like, there's people that they just coast through life, dude. And they think they're just going to wake up and make it one day. And he's like, I needed to get to stay competitive. And he goes, the only way I knew how to do this was get myself around businessmen that were attacking the dollar, wanted to build bigger
dogs
lives.
In a different way, dude.
Other dogs. And so he is now he's lending private, private lending, private money lending. So he's lending out capital for people that are building projects. Yeah. He's building a portfolio out in Arizona. And just to have the conversation with him and realize like, I still felt like I was talking to the Devin on the field when I felt like I was looking at him in his pads and he was just like hyping us up, talking about, how to drive forward, how to think differently and keep that dog in you. And just, it's important, I think for us, back to this whole conversation is like, you can live one life in your W-2, right? And you'll
Yeah,
find the pinnacle, but don't forget about you on the way, and build the
for
personal
sure.
brand on the side, and let people know what you're about. Like, no one wants to just think about Gary as the ESPN host, right? That like covers sports. It's like you're into so many other cool things, real
Yeah,
estate, watches, all these things. And I just love that about you. And I think that's why I love these conversations, man. Like when I saw your, and I'm on a little bit of a tangent here, but when what really got me like bought in on you, and like, this is before we even had a conversation, was watching your IG and I saw the New Hampshire tags. I'm like, dude, he's got a place in New Hampshire. Like I used to ski up there all the
yeah,
time. And then the area, you're like, it's right by Gunstock. And like that's a ski mountain that I used to go to. And so long story short, Corey and I have an 18 unit right up the road from you. And then my uncle has a
that's
place
sick.
right down the street. So I'm like, we're closer than we think, man. And then
Yeah.
to have the conversation like this, I feel like we either went to school together, we've known each other for such a long time, because it's like we're talking about the same stuff. But I just,
Well, it's all, yeah, we're all like-minded in that same sense. Everybody wants to be successful, and it all bottlenecks into the same sort of characteristics in being successful in whatever that industry or field particularly is. I tell everybody this, whether it's I'm giving speeches at universities or people just asking, but it's so simple, but so many people neglect it. Like the world is ran by people who care to show up every day, right? And there's so many people who they'll show up physically, right? But mentally, they're not there. So the world is run by people who show up. And if you want it, go get it. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? People are like, hey, how can I be a SportsCenter anchor, for example? I'm like, well, someone's got to sit in the seat, right? So if you want it, go get it. You'll
Yeah.
have to get through me and whoever else, you know what I'm saying, is currently occupying that seat. Randy sits next to me 5 days a week. So you'll have to wait till we're done, and we're not going anywhere anytime soon. We're going to work our hardest to make sure that, for the next 15, 20 years, these are our seats on our particular programs. But the world is ran by people who care to show up.
Love it, man. I want to ask you about some of the skill sets that you've acquired.
Yeah.
Like what are the things that you feel like you need to do the most to stay at the top of your game? A lot of what you do, and I'm looking at your social here, is actually improv. Like you have to think very critically in the moment to know what to say. I know
Yeah.
that there's a lot of the things that are like, you have some sort of a layout or a script, but like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious about the skill sets that you focus on. So people
Yeah.
ask you the questions of how you got there. Now my questions are more so like, how do you stay and how do you get much better and better and better at what you do? Is there certain characteristics or skill sets that you practice? Like, I would love to
Yeah.
hear about that.
It's interesting to know that public speaking is like the number one fear across most people in like public society. So if you're okay, or you can bite the bullet and get comfortable with that, you're already 10 steps ahead of 90% of the population, public speaking, right? And that's doesn't have to be to an arena full of people. You don't have to be, the game day person at UConn basketball games. I'm thinking of my friend Game Day Connor, who literally is on the mic at every UConn game, men's, women's, Hartford Yard Goats, and he's comfortable with, speaking in front of big audiences. You don't have to be that. I'm talking about being comfortable talking to two people, on a recording, or you're a person in a management position and you need to talk to your team of 5 or 6 people. So technically speaking, I would say, because you said the word, so that's what is taking my mind there, is like improv doesn't have to be for people who just want to be funny and the next Steve Carell or like Amy Poehler, right? Like you don't have to take improv because you want to be like this actor. Improv teaches you how to have a conversation with somebody you met 5 seconds ago, to how to react to something you weren't expecting somebody to say to you, how you can actually outwardly project without being nervous, right? So if you have that technical training in your area, and I know there's technical training and then just sort of like mental tools that you need, but I would suggest for anybody to take improv classes if you are uneasy talking to people. In terms of other stuff, I mean, it's not hard to be successful if you just show up, right? You can't, you don't have to coach work ethic. You don't have to coach showing up. You don't have to coach effort. And if you bring that, people will notice.
Yeah. Without a doubt. I think the improv thing is great, man, because like Ryan and I have kind of done our own version of this. Like by doing this podcast for the last 5 years, I feel
Yeah.
so comfortable walking into any room and talking to anyone
Yes.
about a lot of things, because on the other end of you talking is us taking that in, listening, and then asking another question. And now it's helped me
Correct.
with sales. It's helped me with negotiating. It's helped me with my own relationships with friends and family. It's helped you it puts you in a position where you feel like, if I can walk into a room and have a conversation with a Brandon Turner or a
Yep.
Gary or like Ryan mentioned, Devin Kennard, and really bring value to that conversation when we're from
Yep.
completely different worlds.
Correct.
So that's kind of been our version of it. And I think it's really helped us significantly. The question I have for you, Gary, now is like, you know, I'm curious about, we kind of asked you a little bit about what's next, but I'm wondering if we were to have a conversation 3 years from now, what are you hoping to accomplish in real estate? Like, what do those goals look like? I know you kind of mentioned you're just starting to branch out on more of the long distance stuff, or 3 hours long distance. If I would, if we're having a conversation in 2027, 2028, what do you want to have happen with your real estate journey?
Ryan, Corey, and Gary take over largest plot of land in the Lakes region, New Hampshire, to build. You know what I'm saying?
Wow.
Like
We're
conversations
already
like
in, dude. We're already in. Took
conversations like
36
this.
minutes. Let's go. That's great.
Networking is such a different animal these days because you can connect with somebody from worlds away or right up the street like so easily. And you establish relationships with them, and then you're thinking, wait a minute, okay, no, we're sort of operating on the same wavelength here. So that's how you build friends and relationships. So 3 years from now, it would be cool to just have a bigger footprint on the stuff I'm already doing, right? Not in a greedy way. I listen to a lot of Dave Ramsey too, which probably runs counterintuitive to like, hey, let's build, leverage, leverage, but let's hate debt. So I'm kind of somewhere in between. So when I say a bigger footprint in the fields I'm already in, people might think that that's greed, but I think greed is more like a mentality, right? And this is what he said, so I'm attributing it to him. Greed is not like a dollar amount or a unit figure. I think greed is a mentality. So I don't want to operate from a place of greed, right? I just like what I'm doing. So if I can continue to expand in an organic way, I'd be okay with that. I can't put a number on it, but I told you earlier, like my goals right now are to, buy a house or two every year. So if we're extrapolating this 5 years from now, it'd be nice to add another 10 doors. That'd be freaking awesome.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
know, maybe be into another ESPN contract, at that point. Yeah. And then just continue to expand the network.
Love it. That's great, man. That's actually the last question for me. We asked this because we got a little in depth here and sort of philosophical, and you kind of brought up your childhood and upbringing. I'm very curious about what drives you and your why behind the whole thing. I think you mentioned a little bit of it, but maybe the next layer deep of it's really, really hard to buy real estate. Just doing that. Yeah. If you were like an agent and you were buying real estate, like it's really hard to acquire 6 doors. It's also really hard to put your head down for 12 years or 15 years and make it to the quote unquote top of your profession at ESPN. You're doing 2 of those at the same time. Something inside you has to get you out of bed every day and has to push you forward. And I'm wondering if you could put that into a 90 seconds of a statement for us of like what it actually is. What's your why?
So you mentioned that reaching the top of your industry is hard. You mentioned scaling in real estate is hard. You know what else is hard is not having any of that or struggling to get by financially every single day. Everything is hard. Every single thing is hard. So you just have to choose what kind of hard you want to live through, right? All right, cool. So I got to pee in a bucket for a couple of months and live uncomfortably for a couple of months. Yeah, that's hard. That sucks. But you know what else sucks is having to deal with rent going up every single year because you don't own that property and you're beholden to somebody who might spike rent on you, which, by the way, in 5 years, I've never risen rent on anybody except on one property. And that's just because it's a government funded property. So as they expand, so do I. Everything is hard. You just have to choose what kind of hard you're okay with. And I think that's the long and short of it. Right.
Yeah. I love it, man. You talked a lot about a lot of things that resonate with me, and it I just think about gratitude a lot, right? You talked about peeing in the bucket, but I also think that someone somewhere today is having the worst day of their life, right? While we
Hmm.
are having a great day, a normal day, but we get to talk and build our network and have great conversations and meet people like you. And so I think it's like taking a step back in the moment when we're all grinding, whether it's grinding to be a top dog at ESPN, grinding to have a ton of real estate and provide financial flexibility for our families, or do what we want when we want. But
Yeah.
there are days that are very hard. And I just love that you brought up, like, choose your hard, because, most people wake up and they'll work for someone for 50 plus years, and then they try to start their life and they're retired, but they're
Hmm.
old and frail and they have no time for it. Whereas we're trying to sink in the moment, better ourselves, but enjoy the moment while we're going through it. Right. Because
Definitely.
there's no way to do it other than to appreciate the journey. Right. And most people blink through and they want to get through the journey without trying to celebrate it along the way. And I think just even
Yeah.
this conversation, we all kind of know that, and we're doing it. And I want to go to your comment about building a bigger footprint, and that should never be considered greed. I think when you get to the top of your game, right, that's when people that aren't going through this or never have, they think, well, they'll just retire, right? Like, you made it to the pinnacle, but at that point you don't want to stop, because I don't think we'll ever
Yeah.
retire, because you become so good at something. You're like, well, can I teach someone else how to do this? Because I just
Sure.
have this in
Exactly.
me now. And that's part of the fire. So I guess my last question, or I have two more for you, but I'll start here. I think back to the younger you, and you've had this fire in you since basically you were a kid, dude. And so if you
Yeah.
could go back to maybe 18-year-old self, right, knowing everything you know about you and the world right now, Penny,
Yeah.
who would listen to you, what advice would you give him?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, you can't be scared, right? You can't be scared. You got to remember what you're doing it for. And honestly, like, it's gonna go by in a blink of an eye. You have to set your future self up, right? So I'm 38, and you mentioned all these retired athletes. 30 is young, 40 is young, 50 is still young. I'd be so mad at past Gary if 5, 6 years ago I didn't take the chance to set up Gary 5, 6 years from now, like present day Gary, right? Time goes by so fast. 30 is still young, 40 is still young, 50 is still young. Just do it. Stop questioning yourself. Just do it. My situation was specific to me in that, I had the 20,000 saved up. I was at the point in my life where I could afford to risk that. I could lose that. Would it suck? Yes, but it wasn't going to be detrimental to the family I didn't have, right? I didn't have another mouth to feed except my dog, who she's right there. Just, oh wait, you can't really see her. Hold on, I'm in my girlfriend's room. There she
There
is.
you go.
There you
I
go.
love it.
She's like the most spoiled golden doodle in the history of the world. But yeah, just do it. You can't question yourself.
Yeah.
Choose the heart, right?
Yeah, I think I love it, man. And I think you're speaking to us in a number of ways. And, I could speak to this selfishly, and I think it's just good to be candid, right? Like, Corey left his W-2 in the winter and started our full-time coaching and education platform to teach people how to buy their first rental property, because it changed our lives,
Yeah.
right? And so that's his new W-2, if you will, right? And I'm still, managing my W-2. I have a family. I have a 2-year-old, a wife. And
Yeah.
not to make an excuse, but it's a little bit
No,
harder to do.
security is great, man. There's nothing wrong with that. I would love those two things to run parallel for the rest of my life too.
Yep. No, and totally. And I think I'm at this like impasse where I've reached the pinnacle, right? Like, from where I'm at, I am the top dog in my like respective role, right? But it's become easy, easy in a way. There's things that happen all the time to change the world and the economy and things. But my point is, I've reached a point where it's like, at some point I'm going to have to give it up, right? And like the health insurance thing, any excuse I possibly have is going to have to go out the door at some point. And I'm hearing more conversations from guys like you and other guys on the show. And it's encouraging me to get there. And maybe it's like a dollar amount, but I think at some point, I just hearing you talk about, 50-year-old Gary, right? Or 40-year-old Gary, and looking back and saying, hey dude, would you regret not taking that leap? And do you want to be in the same position you were, 10 years from now or 5 years from now? And I know that's not an easy thing to answer for anybody.
No,
but
hook up, dude. Look out for your future self. I am friends with people who I went to broadcast school with, and they had job offers. Like, and the first job in broadcast is the hardest job to get, and they had proper job offers, but they didn't want to move out of state. They were too comfortable living with where they're at, and we're still friends, and we stay connected on Facebook or whatever. And this is no knock to people who do this, but like, they've not left the hometown. They married, somebody from the hometown. And I'm like, damn, that 18 years, 15 years since college went by in the blink of an eye. I'm wondering if there's like a tinge of, man, I should have gone out and explored. I should have taken that opportunity. Would your future self be mad at, your present day self or your past self for not taking those opportunities? And I'd be remiss not to say, because you asked me the why, and I tell this story, and I told this when I did the commencement at my college a couple of years ago, but like my why ultimately is from my parents. I mentioned them at the beginning. My dad, he enlisted in the Army when he was 17. He took care of his family. Every check he got, he sent back home. So he was the guy in his family, had 5 siblings. And he had to enlist in the Army because there was no other option. And then, of course, he met my mom. She moved over here from Korea. So I guess ultimately my why is I never, ever, ever want to be in position that my parents need something that I can't provide for them, because they provided me the best upbringing they could, given their circumstances. And I never, ever want to be in a position, because fortunately they're still with me. They just actually going to be moving down to Florida next month, that if they ever need anything, I'm not the first call.
Yep.
And that's ultimately the why.
I love
that's
that.
a powerful why, man. It's something that will carry you forward. And it's similar for me. Like my dad, I was telling him the other day, cause he got to this point in his life where he was like, he thought he would have more. He's so grateful for what he has, but he thought he would be able to exit a business that he owned for 50 years with a big lump of change and run into the sunset. And I told him, I said, Dad, you've created the relationship with your children and set them up. And we grew up in such a great way that now we're building our own future, and you have that to be proud of. And we're all going to take care of each other. So I think that something like that will carry you, through the fire, and you've already been through it. So the last thing I'll say is just to your point there of like, life is way too short. Rye says this all the time. We can get smoked by a bus tomorrow. So it's like, it's too short to not bet on yourself. And I know we're talking, it's kind of like preaching to the choir, but I'm really talking to those people that are listening, that are driving. They're like questioning whether or not they should bet on themselves, or the person that you're describing who never left their hometown. Now, if they're 100% happy, I have no problem with that, man. Live your life, do your thing. But if there's an ounce of you that thinks the what if, or the should I have bet on myself, or should I have taken that chance? It's like, it's so finite. This whole thing is so finite. So why not put your message out there? Why not build a brand? Why not move every year? Why not live behind a curtain for a while? Why not just try new things until you've exhausted all your options? And then you know what? You can go back and live the boring life if it didn't work out, but why not give it that chance? So
got to do it. Don't want to live with the regret. Definitely post the content, say the thing, take the chance, spend the money.
Yeah. 100%.
I'm all there. I'm with you.
Yeah, man. I love this stuff, and it makes me think, and I do say that all the time. It's like you never know when your last breath is, or when something's going to happen, and you don't. It's that constant battle, and we all have it. And I don't have the right answer. I just want to like bring light to it here. It's like you have that constant battle for providing financial security for yourself and for your family, which is why people go chase the dollar. But then there's also chasing your purpose in life. And you're like, dude, I just want to be able to do what I want when I want, but like feel fulfilled at the same time, not just sit home and do nothing all day. Like you want to chase that excitement. So like, what gets you out of bed? What do you enjoy doing? And find a way to wrap that into making money around it if you can do it all day, right? Or maybe it's just not making money all around it. And if you are happy being the hometown guy, marrying the girl that you went to high school with, and you're thrilled, and you, as Corey mentioned, it's like the best thing since sliced bread, and you're just so happy and fulfilled, then that's you, man. You got everyone has their own story, and they see people in shining lights. And I think they think that the world is going to get infinitely better when they get to that stage, but everyone still has problems. Everyone still has things that they go through. And so if you can be living in the moment and enjoying yourself, you're living a fulfilling life. And it's not always about the money. It's just what I want to highlight for people. Probably contrary to, most things we talk about on here, building wealth, stability, but you got to take care of number one. And that's all of us, right? Like take care of yourself and what's between the ears. But last one for me is because it's not every day we get to interview someone with such a fun background, man, and like so unique as you. And so I'd be remiss if I didn't say this or ask this question, but I'm really looking for, if you can remember, and you probably have a ton of these, but what's your favorite memory or most exciting moment that you've had working for ESPN, and maybe give us a peek behind the curtain for someone that gets to see so many exciting things on a daily basis.
Okay, you know what's cool, and this just speaks to like how basic I am and how much of just like a dude I grew up as. Like legit, when I say like, I was the prototypical like growing up in a middle class home in middle America's, Colorado, so we're further out west. But so Randy Moss was, in my eyes, second best receiver of all time. Jerry Rice, the numbers back it up, but Randy Moss was that dude on every single one of our fantasy teams, and he was peak Randy Moss with 1998 through whenever. So that was when I was about 10, 11 years old. So anyway, all that to say, I grew up knowing Randy Moss was absolutely freaking him. And one of my very first fall at ESPN, I was kind of just hanging around the studios, sort of shadowing different shows, hanging around, and I'm sitting in this long corridor and, just kind of on my phone, staying low, staying out of the way because I'm still so new at ESPN. And then like down the hall, I hear the door open and I look and it's Randy Moss. And this is the first time I've seen him in person, Randy Moss. And it's this long corridor from the parking lot entrance to the makeup room where everybody kind of gets ready. And it's just me at the end of the hall. And here comes Randy Moss, just walking, strolling, minding his own business on a Sunday. And we make eye contact. And he was just like, he's from Virginia, so like super Southern drawl, right? And he's like, "What's up, dog?" And I thought it was the coolest moment ever, dude. I'm like, wait a minute, what? So I just kind of gave him a, "What's up, man?" And it was just, holy crap. That was Randy freaking Moss. And we shared a moment, he's had a billion times and he would never remember it. But for me, I was like, holy crap. That's my coworker. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, God dang, that's the greatest of all time. That's that's straight cash, homie. And he just like had this moment with me. And as a sports fan, as a kid growing up in America, loving the NFL, I was like, I made it. Holy crap. So, I still get kind of goosebumps just thinking of that, like one brief interaction. And there's so many of those. But that one comes to mind because this past fall, he was diagnosed with cancer and he's battling and whatnot. And he made a return in the playoffs. So hopefully we see him back and healthy next fall. But yeah, that was just one of the examples. I had another one of those with Vince Carter. And the list goes on and on.
Yeah, it's cool, Gary, that when you in that moment, Randy Moss wasn't thinking like, I'm Randy Moss. He's thinking like, I'm this guy, Gary's my coworker, and maybe he's even looking up to somebody like you because he's now learning a new trade. So it's like you're just on the same playing field, right? As if you were standing in the stands and he's on the field. It's a very different interaction. So I think that's a testament to like just putting different people in different situations and knowing like, oh, like he's actually just a guy that is
and he's
real.
So cool.
Yeah,
he's so cool. And after a while, after he got familiar with my face, I've had conversations with him because Sunday SportsCenter, we get done, NFL Countdown goes, so we're always in passing. Sometimes we have a couple of minutes to share in the green room. So after I got comfortable with him, I did ask him this past football season. I was like, Randy, bro, do you ever just wake up in the morning and think to yourself, I'm mother effing Randy Moss, dude. Like, I'm him. And he was like, no, man, not really, man. Like, no, man, I'm more focused on watching my sons play football. Like, he's a dad now, right? So I don't know. That's cool. Yeah. And again, that goes back to like I would never thought a sixth grade Gary would be able to have conversations with like, these dudes we grew up watching and we had on our fantasy teams, but here we are 20 years later. So we'll let's hope to do it for another 20 years.
Yeah, man, I have no doubt you will. You're really, really talented. And I appreciate your time today. This has been awesome just to get to know you, just to see the other side of you, the backwards hat hoodie Gary is cool.
Yeah, this is the standard uniform. Yeah, if we're being 100% honest. Yeah.
I like that.
Anybody who's watching from SportsCenter Snapchat knows.
100%. For sure. Well, Gary, if people want to learn more about you, they want to follow you or network or just maybe follow in your footsteps and just try to learn some of the game that you've done, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
I would say just tune into the Wealth Truth podcast because I'm going to become the third host. All right. Revolving host. No, Hit me up on all social platforms, The Kimchi Poppy. I'm easy to find.
Cool.
So yeah, hit me up. If you guys ever want to have conversations, this going to the viewers and listeners, hit me up in the DMs. This is sort of how this meeting came to be. So I love talking real estate. I love talking watches, cars, anything else. Oh yeah, and sports too. So definitely hit me up.
Beautiful, man. This is awesome. We appreciate your time. It was so cool to get to know you, and thanks for coming on today.
Thanks, guys. This was great.
Gary, one of my favorite episodes to date, man. Genuinely pleasure to getting to know you. And I'm glad we run in the same circle now. So anything we can do for you,
Definitely.
we appreciate you.